John 19, we finally see the end of Jesus' life as he gives his life as a ransom for the souls of men and women as he dies on the cross. And how we got to this point is that Jesus has been arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's been taken under cover of night and undergone a Jewish trial, which was illegal. And then he's going to undergo the Roman trial at the break of dawn. And once he undergoes the Roman trial, Pilate tries to release Jesus because he doesn't have any reason to crucify him. But under pressure that there might be a riot, Pilate hands Jesus over to be scourged. As a criminal, the Romans would strip you naked, they would turn you around to the wall while you were bound, and they would whip your back, or they would tie you to a post and start to whip you with what was known as a cat of nine tails, which was a leather-handled, leather-stripped whip that had small balls of lead in it or metal, pieces of sharp bone, pieces of sharp metal that was embedded in the pieces of leather. And what they would do is they would whip you from the side, and they would totally tear your back open from each side. And eventually you would start to bleed, you would start to gush your own bodily fluids from top to bottom, and they would whip you until you had no will to fight left in you. And what they would do is then they would take you outside the city carrying the post that you would be crucified with. And outside the city, which is where we are today, this is the wall of Jerusalem, they would pound posts in the ground just outside the city gate, and they would have you carry your own piece of the cross outside the city from the place that they had whipped you. And as you can see behind me, all the people passing back and forth, doing contracts, doing all the kinds of things that would happen outside the city gate. They take Jesus, they lay him in the dirt, they take long spikes and run it between the bones in his wrist, because your body weight cannot be held by your hands being pierced. So they would run it between the bones that run this way in your wrist. And once they've nailed him to that cross piece that he has carried outside the city, they pick him up and they set him on top of the spikes that they've driven in the ground, the pieces of wood they've driven in the ground here. And they set him on top of there, and they pound a spike to hold him in there, and then they spiked his feet together through the bottom piece of wood. And as Jesus hung here, crucifixion was about a few things. It was supposed to last a long time, it was supposed to be public, and it was supposed to be excruciating. In fact, we get the word excruciating from excruce, which is from the cross or out of the cross. We actually have an English word describing the extreme anguish and pain you get from being crucified. And as Jesus hung there for 6 hours, he would be pushing on the nail in his feet and pulling up, trying to get a breath of air, and then he would drop back down. He went up and down with his back shredded open on a rough piece of wood for 6 hours, suffering innocently. And now, as the sun was going down, he dies, and he utters up the words, "It is finished." And all the people passing by, all the mockers, all those that loved him, all those that didn't know anything about him until that day, they see a naked man, whipped and tortured and beaten, finally give up his spirit. And what they don't realize is that man crucified right outside their city gate here in Jerusalem is their Messiah that would not only die for the sins of the Jews, but the sins of the Gentiles, that he would give his life as a ransom for many. And now, Jesus is not just going to die, but as we'll see in 3 days, he will be buried in a rich man's tomb, and he will actually not just come back to life, but resurrect, proving his power as the Son of God.